You are moving. But with someone who loves you, this is your partner's. Something shifted the moment the last box touched the floor. Not because the move had officially begun, but because someone standing quietly across the room smiled in a way that revealed they had been waiting for this day much longer than you realized. Nothing dramatic was said. No grand speech. Just one look that carried relief, excitement, and a promise that didn't need words. Why did this move matter so much to them? And why did they seem absolutely certain that everything ahead would be different? Before another suitcase could be closed, one unexpected conversation began changing the meaning of every step you were about to take. Stay with this, because the smallest moment inside this move hides the biggest truth of all. The morning felt ordinary from the outside. Cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. Coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter. The familiar echoes of an almost empty home. But your partner wasn't focused on packing. They kept pausing, looking around each room as though memorizing pieces of a life that had quietly prepared both of you for this exact chapter. Then they picked up something surprisingly simple, a faded photo tucked inside an old drawer. Instead of putting it into a box, they held it for a few extra seconds and smiled. Not because they wanted to stay, but because they finally believed it was safe to leave. That's when you noticed something you hadn't seen before. Every difficult moment you'd faced together hadn't pushed them away. It had slowly convinced them that wherever you were going next, they wanted to be there beside you. But one question still remained. What had finally erased every lingering doubt inside their heart? The answer arrived in a place neither of you expected. Hours later, while the moving truck waited outside, an unexpected pause changed the entire rhythm of the day. Your partner gently reached for your hand, not to stop you, but to slow the moment down. They looked directly into your eyes with the kind of calm that only appears after someone has made an important decision deep inside themselves. Then came a sentence so quiet that it almost disappeared beneath the sounds of the neighborhood. Home isn't the address we're leaving, it's the future we're building together. Suddenly, every heavy box seemed lighter. Every goodbye felt less painful. Every uncertain mile ahead transformed into possibility instead of fear. Yet there was still one detail they hadn't shared. Something they had quietly planned long before the moving date was ever chosen. And when that hidden surprise finally comes into the light, you'll understand why this move was never only about changing locations, it was always about beginning the life they had secretly hoped you would share together. Something else quietly unfolded just as the truck disappeared around the corner. It wasn't inside one of the boxes. It wasn't written on a moving checklist. It was hidden in the peaceful expression on your partner's face. For the first time in a long time, they weren't wondering what might go wrong. They were imagining everything that could finally go right. But there was one destination they couldn't stop thinking about, and it had almost nothing to do with the new house itself. The next few moments reveal why this journey means far more to them than anyone else realizes. As the miles passed beneath the tires, your conversations became lighter, but your partner grew unusually thoughtful. They kept glancing out the window, smiling whenever the road curved toward another unfamiliar town. Then they laughed softly and admitted something they had never said before. I used to think the perfect place would make me happy. Then I realized the right person makes every place feel like it belongs. Those words settled into the silence between you like the final piece of a puzzle. They weren't chasing a dream neighborhood or a bigger home. They were chasing a future where every ordinary morning started beside someone they truly loved. And without realizing it, you had become the center of that future. Before this story continues, if it's reminding you of someone special, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to join more heartfelt stories like this. Because the next discovery proves your partner has been planning something beautiful for much longer than you think. When you finally arrived, the evening sun painted everything in warm golden light. The neighborhood felt unfamiliar, yet strangely welcoming. While you explored the empty rooms together, your partner quietly wandered into one corner of the house and stood there for a moment without speaking. You asked what they were looking at, but they simply smiled and said, "Can you picture it?" At first, you didn't understand. Then they began describing little moments that hadn't happened yet. Weekend breakfasts by the window, laughter filling the hallway, quiet evenings after long days, celebrations with friends, and peaceful nights where neither of you had to wonder what tomorrow would bring. They weren't describing furniture or decorations. They were describing a life. Then, just before the first box was carried inside, they reached into their pocket and touched something they had been keeping hidden since before the move began. They weren't ready to show you, not yet. But whatever they were protecting was about to transform this new beginning into a memory neither of you would ever forget. Something caught your attention before the first room was completely unpacked. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a phone call. It was the way your partner quietly slipped away for a few minutes, carrying that same small item they had kept hidden since the journey began. They weren't avoiding you, they were preparing something. When they returned, nothing seemed different at first glance. Yet there was a new kind of excitement in their eyes, as though a long-awaited moment had finally arrived. One question lingered in the air. What could possibly matter more than unpacking on the very first evening in your new home? The answer revealed itself one gentle step at a time. Your partner invited you to follow them into the room with the largest window, where the last rays of sunlight stretched across the floor. The space was still empty except for a few unopened boxes, but they smiled as if they could already see years of memory surrounding you both. Then they reached into their pocket and slowly unfolded a small piece of paper. It wasn't an expensive gift or an elaborate surprise. It was a handwritten list they had made months ago, long before either of you knew this move would become reality. Across the page were simple hopes: laugh more, worry less, cook together, celebrate small victories, always choose each other, even on ordinary days. Every line felt personal. Every word carried quiet intention. You realized this wasn't a plan for a perfect house. It was a promise for a meaningful life. And somehow, that made the empty room feel completely full. As the evening settled in, the two of you opened just enough boxes to make the space comfortable. A lamp glowed softly in the corner. 2 mugs rested on the kitchen counter. The unfamiliar house slowly began feeling less like a destination and more like the beginning of something deeply familiar. Your partner looked around with quiet satisfaction before saying, "We've spent so much time dreaming about tomorrow that I don't want us to miss today." That single sentence changed everything. The move was never about escaping the past, it was about giving your future room to grow. But just when you thought every surprise had finally been revealed, your partner glanced toward one unopened box tucked carefully in the corner. They smiled to themselves and whispered, "Not tonight, the right moment is almost here." Whatever was waiting inside that final box wasn't just another belonging. It held the one surprise capable of turning this beautiful new chapter into the unforgettable story they had been dreaming of all along. Something felt different when the morning sunlight poured through the windows for the very first time. The house was still surrounded by unopened boxes, bare walls, and the quiet sounds of a neighborhood slowly waking up. Yet your partner stood in the middle of the living room as if they had been waiting for this exact sunrise. They took a slow breath, looked around, and smiled without saying a word. It wasn't because everything was finally unpacked, it wasn't. It was because they knew the most meaningful part of this move had nothing to do with furniture or addresses. It was about creating a place where every ordinary day could become a memory worth keeping. But before breakfast, they quietly reached for that final unopened box, and suddenly it became clear that one last surprise had been waiting for the perfect moment. Inside wasn't anything expensive or extravagant. Instead, your partner carefully lifted out a small wooden keepsake box. They placed it on the table between you and opened it with the kind of excitement usually reserved for life's biggest milestones. Inside were tiny reminders of your journey together, a ticket from your first trip, a handwritten note you had forgotten giving them during a difficult week, a photo from an ordinary afternoon that had somehow become unforgettable, and a blank journal resting beneath them all. When you looked up, they smiled and said, "Everything before today brought us here. Everything after today belongs in this book." It wasn't a gift for one special occasion. It was an invitation to keep writing your story together, one simple day at a time. And if this story has made you think about the people who make a place feel like home, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys like this. The most beautiful chapter, however, hadn't been written yet. As evening settled over your new neighborhood, the house no longer echoed with emptiness. It carried laughter, quiet conversations, and the comforting feeling that neither of you had to search for home anymore, you had brought it with you. Your partner placed the journal on a nearby shelf, leaving the first page open. Across the top, they had already written one sentence: "This is where forever starts." They handed you the pen, not asking for a perfect message, only an honest one. In that simple moment, the move became more than a change of scenery. It became a shared promise that every challenge ahead would be faced side by side, every success celebrated together, and every ordinary day treasured because it was lived with someone who truly cared. As you looked around one last time before the night grew quiet, your partner glanced toward the window with a knowing smile. "Just wait until tomorrow," they whispered. "There's still one dream we've only just begun to build." Something quietly began taking shape before either of you fully noticed it. It wasn't another delivery truck or another stack of boxes waiting by the front door. It was a feeling. The kind that sneaks into ordinary mornings and suddenly makes an unfamiliar place feel like it's always belonged to you. Your partner stood by the window with a warm cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood come to life. Children laughed in the distance. A neighbor waved as they walked past. The air carried the calm rhythm of a brand new beginning. Then your partner turned toward you with a smile that seemed even brighter than the sunrise. "I was worried we'd have to build a new life from scratch," they admitted. Now I realize we've been building it all along. But there was still one small plan they hadn't shared, a dream that had quietly grown stronger with every mile of the journey. Later that afternoon, the two of you wandered through the neighborhood together, taking streets that neither of you had ever walked before. Every corner seemed to offer another little surprise, a cozy cafe filled with friendly conversations, a peaceful walking path lined with trees, and a small park where families gathered as the sun drifted lower in the sky. Your partner wasn't simply exploring the area. They were imagining your future inside it. They pointed toward a quiet bench and laughed, saying, "I can already picture us sitting here years from now, remembering how nervous we were on moving day." It wasn't wishful thinking. It was confidence. They had stopped wondering whether this place could become home because they had already decided that home was wherever the two of you continued choosing each other. Then they reached into their pocket once again and revealed a folded map with several tiny circles drawn across it. Every circle marked a place they hoped the two of you would discover together, not because they had already been there, but because every adventure would become another page in the story you were writing side by side. As the evening settled over your new home once again, the empty walls no longer looked unfinished. They looked full of possibility. A favorite song played softly in the background while dinner cooked in the kitchen, and the quiet moments between conversations somehow felt just as meaningful as the words themselves. Your partner looked around the room, then back at you, with an expression that carried complete certainty. "We didn't move to find a better place," they said. "We moved to give our best memories somewhere to grow." Those words stayed with you long after the lights dimmed for the night. Yet as you prepared to close the day, your partner gently placed one more envelope on the table with a playful smile. "Don't open it tonight," they whispered. "Tomorrow, it'll mean even more." Whatever waited inside wasn't meant to surprise you for a moment, it was meant to remind both of you that the greatest chapters of your story were still waiting to be lived. Something about the next morning felt impossible to explain. The house hadn't changed overnight, yet every room seemed warmer, brighter, more familiar. The sound of footsteps echoed differently now, not because the walls were fuller, but because they finally carried a sense of belonging. Your partner noticed it too. They smiled as they opened the curtains and let the sunlight pour inside. Then their eyes drifted toward the envelope resting exactly where they had left it the night before. "Now," they said softly, "it's ready." The excitement in their voice wasn't about what was inside the envelope. It was about what it represented. And as you reached for it, you realized this wasn't the end of a surprise. It was the beginning of something you would remember for years. Inside was a single folded letter, written in your partner's handwriting long before the move ever happened. The first sentence stopped you in your tracks. "If you're reading this, it means we were brave enough to choose our future instead of our fears." Every line that followed felt deeply personal. They wrote about the nights they silently wondered if life would ever slow down enough for the two of you to truly enjoy it. They admitted that they didn't dream about perfection. They dreamed about ordinary mornings, shared laughter after long days, spontaneous road trips, decorating for the seasons, celebrating little victories, and ending every evening grateful that you were still choosing one another. At the bottom of the page was one final promise: no matter how many places we live, I'll never stop finding new reasons to fall in love with the life we're creating together. You looked up, and before a single word was spoken, everything that mattered had already been understood. As the day unfolded, the house became filled with small moments that no moving checklist could have predicted. A favorite picture finally found its place on the wall. The kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of a home-cooked meal. Music drifted through the hallway while both of you laughed over where a bookshelf should go. None of these moments were extraordinary on their own. But together, they formed something far more meaningful. They became proof that happiness rarely arrives all at once. It grows quietly through shared moments, thoughtful gestures, and the simple decision to keep building a future side by side. Then, just before the evening settled in, your partner looked toward the front porch and smiled as though they had remembered one final piece of the plan. "Tomorrow," they said with quiet excitement, "we'll make the first memory that could only happen here." And somehow, you already knew that the next chapter wouldn't just celebrate your new home, it would celebrate the life the two of you were finally ready to live together. Something beautiful was waiting just beyond the front door, and neither of you realized it until the morning unfolded in its own quiet way. The air felt fresh, the neighborhood moved at an easy pace, and everything around you seemed to invite one simple thought: slow down and enjoy this. Your partner stepped outside first, looked back with an excited smile, and said, "Today's not about unpacking the rest of the boxes." That sentence immediately caught your attention. After everything it had taken to get here, what could possibly be more important? They reached for your hand and led you down the walkway with the confidence of someone who had been imagining this moment for a very long time. Every step seemed to carry a purpose that hadn't been explained yet, and somehow that mystery made the morning even more meaningful. The walk wasn't long, but every minute revealed another reason your partner had fallen in love with this new beginning. They introduced you to the little bakery on the corner where the owner greeted everyone with a smile. They pointed toward a quiet trail where the trees formed a peaceful canopy overhead. They laughed as they imagined future evenings spent watching sunsets from a nearby hill. Then they stopped at a small open space overlooking the neighborhood and quietly reached into their pocket one last time. This time there were no hidden notes, no maps, and no envelopes. Instead, they held a tiny house-shaped keychain engraved with two simple words: "Our journey." They placed it in your hand and said, "Every key opens a door, but this one reminds us why we opened this one." It was a small gift, yet it carried every hope, every conversation, every decision, and every dream that had brought the two of you to this exact place. Suddenly, it wasn't just a keepsake. It became a symbol that home would never again be measured by walls or streets. It would always be measured by the life you continued creating together. As the sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, you returned home with hearts that felt lighter than when the day began. The house was no longer simply new, it had already begun collecting stories. The journal on the shelf now held its first few pages. The handwritten letter rested safely inside the keepsake box. The little keychain found its place near the front door, ready to greet every adventure still ahead. Your partner paused for a quiet moment before turning to you with a smile filled with gratitude and hope. "Years from now," they said, "I don't think we'll remember how many boxes we packed or how tired we were. We'll remember that this was the day we stopped waiting for life to begin and realized we were already living it." And as the evening settled peacefully around your new home, one comforting truth became impossible to ignore: the greatest part of this move was never the destination. It was discovering that the person who truly loves you has been building a forever with you all along. Something stayed with you long after the last box had been opened. It wasn't a photograph, a handwritten letter, or even the little keepsakes your partner had carefully saved. It was the quiet realization that,